welcome back to Backseat Designers. This is episode 3 of season 3. Nice little bit of symmetry there. And this is a show in which 3 guys sit round and bitch about adventure games and sometimes come up with some good design ideas. I am the smallest of the 3. My name is Gareth Millward, and the slightly larger babushka doll of this babushka doll of adventure game, whatever that is, Fred.
That metaphor just collided with itself.
Spasiba, Gareth. Thank you and hello.
A professional at this point would restart, but we're going now. And the largest babushka doll, ever so slightly larger than Fred, is, of course, Trolls Plymouth.
Yes, good evening. I think I just stepped all over my own introduction there, but yeah, giddy as hell. Hi, how's everyone doing?
I'm doing fine, thank you. How are you guys doing?
Terrible, but that's a story for another time.
We're off to a depressing start already, but today's subject is kind of depressing, isn't it, Gareth?
Well, that's the point, yeah. We're just going to sit here and we're going to have a nice old rant about when technology gets in the way of a good time. You know those adventure
games? Which it did
games?
just before we started.
That's true.
It did, actually, yes. We had major problems making sure that the recording stuff was working, that microphones were plugged into the right holes, and that everything was doing as it should, because clearly it didn't. But today we're going to be talking. Today we're going to be talking about technology and how technology gets in the way of adventure games. You know, those games where there were too many bugs, where clearly there wasn't enough testing done, and sometimes when some kind of new piece of technology came along, which was shiny and new, and games designers decided, oh, we've got to use this, even though it added absolutely nothing to the actual quality of the game.
That was beautifully put. That is exactly what it feels like.
That was beautifully put, and what I really like about this topic is that it gives us a chance to talk about some games that, you know, if you scrape away the top layer of shit, there's actually a nice game underneath waiting to come out. At least that's the examples I'm going to bring up. That means someone had a great idea, and somewhere along in the execution stage, someone took a big fat massive load on it. And yeah.
Can I start with a little bit of heresy? Because then I'm going to bring up my first example, which is kind of going to be one to divide the waters, so to speak. Because when you guys mentioned that we're talking about games where the interface fucked up the experience and the like, something that I immediately thought is that I have never, ever been able to connect with the original floppy version of The Secret of Monkey Island. And I realized The Secret of Monkey Island is a classic.
Shots fired, everyone.
Yeah. We're going to let you cry a little bit to that, I think.
Gareth is testing out his new toy, which lets him play audio clips in the broadcast.
Yeah, I thought I'd do that and see if it actually works. And I think it does.
It does.
There we go.
It does. It's incredibly loud as well.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll stop that then.
Thank you, Mo. What I'm not about to say is that The Secret of Monkey Island is a shitty game, because it isn't. But something I have never, ever quite been able to love is the ridiculous interface to the SCUM engine that LucasArts had during these years. The problem that I have with it, if I may finish, because I'm sure you have plenty of reasons to attack me afterwards.
I do not.
The main problem I have with it is that there are so many goddamn verbs in the early iteration of the engine. And the main reason I'm bringing up Secret of Monkey Island is that I've never ever really been infatuated with Maniac Mansion and Zack McCracken and what came before that used variations of that same early interface. But my problem with the verb overload is that it's kind of giving you the illusion of having something like a parser at your feet, because there are so many things that to the eye you can do, but when you start using all these different verbs that are distinctly different from the ones you would later wind up with in Day of the Tentacle and Fate of Atlantis, when they had scraped all the irrelevant verbs away, it looks like there's so much to do when in fact there isn't. Lots of these don't do a single fucking thing in the game, and I feel like it's kind of, I wouldn't outright say cock-blocking, but it's kind of the interface that pulls down your zipper and takes off her bra and then just fucks out the door.
This is just the episode of belabored metaphors, isn't it? Also,
It is.
Before I get into what I was actually going to say, you've got feet and mouth with verbs, and you got eyes in that entire rant there. But never once did you actually mention what you use to operate the interface, your hands. I thought that was kind of interesting.
Oh, yeah,
anyway,
do that.
let me just put this quickly into a historical context, because on the surface, I actually do agree with you. I'm not going to attack you. I'm just going to put this into a historical context. Yes, I mean, the interface in the original disk version EGA of Monkey Island is terribly cumbersome. And the worst one of all is the "what is" verb,
Yes.
where when you hover your mouse around the screen, it doesn't actually show you what you're clicking on.
The worst thing about the "what is" verb is that "what is" not even a fucking verb.
And but to put that in a historical context, Secret of Monkey Island was, of course, the game released after Maniac Mansion and Zack McCracken. And let's be honest, LucasArts kind of invented this whole thing. The original Maniac Mansion, of course, was the first on-screen verb selection-driven point-and-clicky type thing. And so, of course, the only thing they had to compare themselves to was the parser. And they knew, obviously, Ron Gilbert and Gary, what's-his-face, Wilmonder?
Eric Wilmonder, I think.
Eric, well, that dude who's probably going to get mighty pissed if he ever listens to this.
You can look all this up on Wikipedia afterwards. So
yeah, he used to be famous.
We probably could. Yeah. No, he's doing Thimbleweed Park, I believe. Anyway, the only thing they had to compare their interface to was the original parser, and they were probably used to using a lot of different, turn on, turn off, climb, push, pull, all this nonsense that you could, as they realized later on in life, just replace with the word use. And of course they also did that with the subsequent releases of Monkey Island. So I agree, the interface is cumbersome as hell, but I can't really hold it against it, because it is a product of its time.
Well, you can say that about a lot of games that we're going to criticize. In that respect, then I think Gareth is going to talk in detail about this later, so I won't shoot off too much. But I mean, stuff like the timer bugs in the CD-ROM version of Space Quest 4 are also kind of products of their time. But that to me doesn't mean that they're excusable. The idea that, well, we can cut out what is and replace it with look is not really something that comes with historical hindsight, in my opinion. I can see that it may have in this case, but I find it a bit disappointing that they didn't examine what they were about to do from a more academic angle, where you could have realized that we can shave these off.
Well, that's hindsight and 2020 and all that. I am, however, going to be highlighting technology gaffes that could have and should have been prevented if anyone on the development team knew what they were doing. But let's turn the mic over to the irreverent Dr. Gareth. I do realize I used irreverent, and see what he has to say.
The Reverend.
Well, now that I've got over my babushka snafu, no, I thought a couple of points that came from that. Number one, it's Gary Winnick, according to Google.
Yeah. Sorry, Gary.
And number two, I suppose, actually, I mean, this is a deeper question, and I think you two covered it in earlier series of Backseat Designers. This idea that actually the invention of point and click took something a little bit away from adventure games, because you lost the parser, you lost that kind of game between you and the designer, in the designer trying to work out what you'll try and do.
Yeah, as Trolls pointed out, what you do with the point and click interface is that you control it with your hands. So there is also what you might call a human interface in the equation. Now, I realize that there is also this when you type in stuff with a keyboard, but it's more like putting thoughts to words, whereas a point-and-click interface is more a case of selecting from pre-recorded thoughts, so to speak.
Yeah, it kind of, I don't know, you lose that kind of sense. There's sort of a sense of you lose something because everything is sort of brought up. At least when you were typing things in, you could you had that kind of, you could suspend your disbelief that you were talking to the game. Whereas when the only options that you're allowed are brought up, it kind of becomes very clear, actually, you're kind of almost seeing behind the code in a way that doesn't quite work.
You arguably substitute something cerebral for something tactile.
Well, in the case of Monkey Island and certainly Zach McCracken and Maniac Mansion, is that what they were going for was a sentence constructor, and I think simply, I mean, going back and saying that there are too many verbs is of course a legitimate criticism in hindsight, but it's I think it's slightly unfair to levy it at it from the perspective of when the game was being designed, because they wanted you to be able to construct a sentence that quite clearly stated what you wanted to do, and I just think they just didn't realize that a lot of these words were in fact synonyms once you got down and nitty gritty to it.
And I think probably one of the reasons why this kind of thing didn't really catch on is, I mean, you two, not being native English speakers, can probably attest to this, that that would be a complete and utter bitch to try and translate.
Yeah. Well, the Germans did it. There was a German localized version of Secret of Monkey Island, and I think there might also have been a couple of more Spanish or something.
Oh yeah, there were plenty.
Well, actually, I was doing some research before the show, knowing that I was going to be hosting and knowing that I was going to have to be talking to a couple of foreign, co-hosts. We are Northern Europeans, but we are members. We are citizens of the European Union, but we also have a very different national culture. And I was doing some research on the PS3 version of Monkey Island. In a Danish shop, and this is how Monkey Island is described in that Danish shop.
Ja, vi er altså en dansk webshop, også selvom nedenstående produktbeskrivelse er på engelsk. Vi beklager selvfølgelig, at vi ikke har nogen dansk beskrivelse endnu, men vi arbejder på højtryk for at...
So there you go.
What the hell? First of all, that sounded like a text-to-speech engine. Second of all, the last sentence is completely cut off.
Yeah, it's actually not. It's actually not a text-to-speech engine. Gareth keeps a Danish guy in his cupboard.
Very much so.
That was genuinely creepy. Also, it didn't so much describe Monkey Island as it was a guy apologizing that they didn't have a Danish description for the game.
He's apologizing for the fact that, well, even though we're a Danish web shop, we've only got a description in English. We're so sorry you're all illiterate and never bothered to learn English, the international language of the world.
His pronunciation of the word web shop was fantastic. Web shop.
I think we can. If I can't hold verb overload against the Secret of Monkey Island interface, you can't hold Danish pronunciation against the computer. I thought it did very well. It wasn't an A+, but it was probably an A.
Okay, well, moving on from that, because Google Translate may have given me a clue as to the fact that might not have necessarily been a full sentence or anything completely useful. Have we got any other examples where people or developers have tried to bring in some kind of technology which is new and actually it's not quite worked?
I do have one, but I think once I mention the title, I'm going to leave it to Trolls because it's among his favorite game series, certainly. Under a Killing Moon. And you know exactly what I would talk about if it were me. So.
I think I do, and we are talking about video streaming off the CD. Am I correct?
Yes, we are.
Video quality, because Under Killing Moon was released in 1994, and the Seventh Guest had just come out in, I believe it was 92 or 93, and the whole idea of streaming video off the CD was a tricky thing. So what Under Killing Moon does, and does terribly, is to actually play videos, which is kind of interesting on its own. The first, 15, 20, maybe 30 seconds of video will play smoothly and look as beautiful as the developers could make it back then. And then the frame rate will drop abysmally, and it will drop to like 5 or 10 frames a second. And I don't know, even on today's computer, if you run Under Killing Moon on from your hard drive in DOSBox on today's modern computers, it still does that. And I have no idea why it does it, but it really, apart from the slightly dodgy cinematography, which again is kind of in the similar boat as the verbalist from the first version of Monkey Island. You can't really fault the game for trying something new. They had to try something. So all the actors were filmed separately. So whenever an actor is not speaking, he simply turns into a cardboard cutout of himself and just stands there completely motionless. And some of the camera angles are a bit weird. But the whole thing about actually streaming the video off the CD, I've never and they solved this little technical conundrum with the Pandora directive somehow. But it just looks really weird in Under a Killing Moon. And for those of you who have never actually seen this in action and haven't realized this when they played the game, you will now be unable to unsee that.
Yes.
Whenever a video plays, you'll just sit there and go, my God, it actually is choppy as fuck.
Well, I do agree with you on hindsight and all of that, but something that bothers me about it is that, it kind of wrecks my suspension of disbelief completely, which is something that doesn't happen in the Pandora Directive. And yes, Access Software were pioneers in a lot of tech areas, and they were certainly the first to do an FMV game of this magnitude. I think it beats The Seventh Guest quite easily, but I do think, the point about hindsight aside, you always have the ability to say, we can't do it well enough, so should we do it?
Well, actually, you say hindsight, but from the way that you've described that, it seems to be an issue that, did they ever give it out to normal people to test on their normal machines?
Actually,
they
Under
can't
a
have done,
Killing
surely.
Moon, Under a Killing Moon, they went to great lengths to make sure that it would run on a 386. It wouldn't run very great, and but the videos would play. You could even switch the videos into a VGA resolution instead of the Super VGA resolution.
Yeah,
they went to great lengths to make sure that beast ran on somewhat older PCs than what was cutting edge at the time.
They probably knew that no matter if it was going to make a great game, it was going to make a great tech demo, and it very much was a showcase. Look what my computer can do now that I've attached a CD drive to it, even though it's only a 386.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, in an alternative life, Richard Cobbett, who was a guest on Open Crowdsource, which you can find on YouTube and on our website.
And that's the only thing he's ever done.
That's the only thing he's ever done. Yeah. We made him. He was mentioning that one of the things about adventure games in the 80s and the 90s was that they were always pushing right at the very boundaries of what computers could do, and I suppose this is, in terms of what we're discussing here, actually the 80s and 90s are probably a really good point for discussing this thing about technology, because they were always pushing at the very limits, but not necessarily, or reaching for the stars, but not necessarily always quite reaching them.
Right, early 3D games are another example, and that's obviously quite a bit later than the 80s and early 90s, but when we got to the early 2000s and everything had to be 3D, and you'd have this little logo on the cover art saying hardware acceleration required, and it looked like shit. I understood what they were trying to do, but it generally looked like shit.
Can anyone with a quick Wikipedia finger look up when Mask of Eternity was released?
Well, Gareth has a PhD, so he has a quick Wikipedia finger. But I do think off the top of my head it was 1998, actually.
Yeah, something around that. That was 19. Well, the release of Mask of Eternity clearly marked the complete and utter end of adventure games as we dearly love them. And you're quite right. That game was horrific to look at.
December 1998.
It's very brown.
Yes, which is the most. That is actually the most appealing. No, not appealing.
Yeah, I've heard. Well, let me put it.
It's
this
the kindest
way.
thing you can say about it. It's the kindest thing.
I have had shits that have been less brown and murky than that game.
Well, you say that, but actually, with they've got the box art up here on the Wikipedia entry, and in the bottom corner it says it's very brown. PC Gamer, 5 stars.
Seriously?
No.
Oh,
can I bring up an alternative idea? Because my example is not so much technology chasing. I do understand that once you're on the cutting edge and you're trying something that really hasn't been done before, then you are bound to make a couple of mistakes. I mean, point and click interface for Monkey Island, full motion video for Under a Killing Moon, the early early 3D polygons for games like BioForge, and before that,
it's never easy to be a trailblazer.
It isn't. What I want to bring up are games that were released using, let's say, tried and true technologies, but somehow managed to fuck them up as well.
Go ahead.
And on that note, I would love to bring up I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream.
Yes.
A game that was recently re-released for iOS and Android devices, where they have gone to as great lengths as they could trying to make this piece of shit playable on a mobile device. But what they could not get around, and I suppose no one could get around, was the god-awful engine used by that game. And
it is very, very flawed. And it's a shame because I've played a bit of it. I'm playing it these days because I have it on Steam, and I thought I'd play it a little in preparation for this. And I really do love the story, and I love Harlan Ellison's performance and his writing. It's cracking. It's brilliant. And then you just slap it all together with this homebrew engine, which was shit. You know, why they didn't try to appropriate something that had already been constructed in advance, I don't know. I mean, the build engine, it is not.
Oh, here's the kicker. This is actually an improved version of the engine that was used to power Inherit the Earth. Now, let me just describe this for people who haven't played Inherit the Earth or I Have No Mouth. They are simple point-and-click games that pretty much rip off the LucasArts interface. 2D sprites on pre-rendered backgrounds or pre-drawn, whatever. And you have your standard verbs, look, open, get, walk, all of this stuff. And an inventory in the bottom right corner. There is no reason... And this game, by the way, came out in, I think, 96 or 97, something like that. I think it's
95, isn't it? 95 or 96.
Could be. It's around
1st of October 1996.
96. There you go. So it was late 1996. Now, bear in mind, the Day of the Tentacle came out in 93. And there is simply, and that, I mean, I think we can all agree, they pretty much perfected the point-and-click interface of at least LucasArts standards around that time. And then they started fucking it up with Sam and Max. But let's not go there right now. Inherit the Earth had at least 3 or 4 years to learn how to do this shit. And they somehow managed to fuck it up entirely. Let me give you a couple of examples, or at least one. Clicking on a verb sometimes works and sometimes doesn't. Moving around the screen, having the sprite character actually move around the screen will cause him at various points to moonwalk across the screen, as in walk backwards.
Also,
he will get stuck in invisible objects. He will sometimes flat out refuse to appear on screen. And every once in a while, clicking out of the actual screen makes you click the save game icon. Or just not click anything at all. He'll basically just walk around in a circle at the bottom of the screen until you walk him out of the exit hotspot and then back out.
And there are precious few animation frames in the walk cycles themselves. So this German Nazi scientist, Nimdog, kind of looks like a levitating Tibetan monk who has shed his pants.
And it is quite a shame because, as Fred says, there's an awfully good game hiding out in there somewhere. The story is really great, if slightly depressing, but it is Harlan Ellison, so what do you expect? Well, let's not go too deep into the puzzle design and the end game, which seemed to piss everyone off. But the actual engine itself is just, my God, you've had all these years to perfect this craft. What in the fuck just happened, guys?
It really is a shame.
But is this a fault of the technology? Is it a fault of people choosing the wrong technology? Or is it just very bad coders that didn't put it through the proper testing procedures and properly proofread what they were doing?
That's a very good question.
I think it was a combination of both, actually, because this game was one of 2 games developed by these guys called the Dreamers Guild. Pretentiousness alert right there. I'm sure they're very nice people. But Inherit the Earth, their first game, used basically the same engine. It was in VGA resolution, and it had a couple of odd little quirks, such as moving around large areas meant it switched to an isometric view, but all the sprites remained, full frontal 2D, which was quite weird. But it actually worked sort of well. I mean, for one, the whole hit detection thing didn't seem to be much of a problem there, and characters actually walked in the direction they were facing. When they upgraded the engine for I Have No Mouth, and yes, it is the same engine, something went wrong.
Well,
it might
It might also, be as pragmatic as simply blowing the budget, because the game did take itself very seriously, and deservedly so, because, well, you got Harlan Ellison writing the script and acting in it. It's based on one of his stories. And you got John Ottman writing the score, who you might know for writing the score to stuff like, I think he wrote the score for Superman Returns or something. He has written a lot of soundtracks in movies that are actually widely known. So maybe it was just a case of not really having the time and or budget to beta test it, because, well, we blew our money on everything else.
Probably. I mean, I remember reading an interview by J. Michael Straczynski, the guy who wrote every single Babylon 5 episode ever, interviewing Harlan Ellison about the game, and it's up on archive.org somewhere, where Harlan is praising the graphics and the music and such, and you can tell, first of all, Harlan Ellison is a notorious technophobe. He refused to actually sit down in front of a computer keyboard to write the script. He wrote it on a manual typewriter and then handed it off to the game's producer. So I'm pretty sure he never actually touched the game. He did, however, look at the pedigree of talent that was involved, the composer, as you mentioned, his own story, and then he just kind of figured, well, I've seen a couple of pictures that they've shown Polaroids of screenshots, because I won't look at a computer screen, and it looks quite all right, I guess. I suppose this is what video games are supposed to look like. So he never actually sat down and tried the game. So he's just praising it left and right and going, it's got, the sounds of the gods, even though he's never actually heard an ad-lib shit itself.
And something else is that the voice acting is actually also pretty good. And this was more of a miss than a hit for most studios, even in '96.
Yeah, and not to belabor the point, so I'm going to make this my last point about the whole thing. Inherit the Earth, which is almost a forgotten game, even though someone tried to kickstart a re-release of it recently. Inherit the Earth, I bought that thing for like the equivalent of $1 at a bookstore sometime long ago, and I put it in, and the graphics are kind of shit, and the story is kind of weird, but the voice acting is phenomenal. I mean, if you haven't played Inherit the Earth and you're just the slightest bit interested in voice acting and VO stuff, play that game, because it's got phenomenal voice acting, which is about the best thing it has. That's the best thing it has going for it, mind you. But still,
duly noted.
Well, I remember playing, certainly talking about Police Quest 4 last week, and the voice acting in that was absolutely awful. Actually, in a lot of the Sierra games, the voice acting wasn't particularly good. I mean, I think Gary Owens in the Space Quest series covers over a lot of cracks.
Yeah, they were kind of trailblazers too, and I get the impression that the only designers who kind of knew what they were doing with the voices were the two guys from Andromeda. Because, come Space Quest 4, which was not that long after King's Quest 5, they were already talking about casting Robin Williams as Roger Wilco.
I don't know how serious they were about that, but I do think they reached out to an agent or something.
We do know the man was a gamer, and the story goes he was interested. We'll never know how far they probably didn't sit down and negotiate about it. It probably didn't get that far. But no. I do like to think that when you sit down and you make a game like that and you decide to get in Robin Williams for the main character's voice, you kind of do know what you're up to. You know what to do with this technology. I mean, others would do the same later on and it backfired. They would hire Christopher Walken for an FMB game. They not being Sierra, the two guys from Andromeda, but just they over there in the game industry, it backfired horribly, because it's really hit and miss to find an actor who acts well in a video game. Access Interactive
Christopher Walken.
Access Interactive
Come on, he was brilliant in Ripper.
Access were great at it, though. I mean, you've got John Agar and Barry Corbin acting their ass off in the Pandora Directive.
Yeah, but you also have to have direction. And I mean, even one of the reasons that Gabriel Knight works as a very good voiceover. I know we're getting terribly off topic, aren't we? The only reason
I don't think we are actually. I don't think we are because
and he says no, so let's go for it.
But I don't think we are because I think the invention of the ability to be able to record voices onto a CD and play them back in a game is a technological advance. But if you don't use it properly, if you don't get people in that can actually talk like human beings, then the technology becomes moot. I mean, you wouldn't move to VGA graphics and have no artists on your staff. And it seems to be that some of these games moved to voice acting and then had no voice actors on their staff.
Right, they thought, well, anyone can act, and it's, King's Quest V is like amateur hour in hell.
But therein lies I mean, we're talking about when technology gets in the way, and in this instance, with regards to voice acting, I think it's human error getting in the way because, like I said, you need good direction, and the reason why Gabriel Knight works is because you got Stuart M. Rosen, who's done voiceover directing for millions of voiceover, like Hollywood type voiceover thing, and LucasArts somehow struck gold with this character Tamlin Barra, who directed the voices for all the classic CD-ROM games that we remember from LucasArts' heyday. You've got. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. Do go on.
I was just going to say, and then you've got whoever did King's Quest V, who apparently was asleep on the job.
Yeah, well, I just wanted to say that all the examples we're talking about here have been, it's been about technology. I make no mistake about that. But human error is kind of at the base of all of it, because if we were talking about technology fucking up on itself, we would just be talking about bugs solely.
Or just misuse of technology.
Well, misuse of technology is a human error. That's my point.
I suppose you're right.
At least I find in this context it is.
It is.
Yeah.
I mean, you could look at... Sorry. You go on.
We're talking over each other here, aren't we? I think that's a good point because it would be impossible to, for example, misuse voiceover actors in 1984.
Unless you're Bill Cosby doing it.
Oh, shots fired. Where's that ding sound?
Wow. Oh, hold on. Haven't got... Oh.
We're still improving this as we go along.
Speaking of when technology gets in the way.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. Yeah, this is very much human error.
But we're trailblazers, let's not forget that. Anyway, Gareth, before I brought up the notorious rapist, you were saying...
No, I think it is important to distinguish between when somebody's just coded something badly and when they've actively made the wrong decision about the kind of the technology that they can use. Because I mean, we could take the positive aspect here and say of all the good things that people have done as new technologies come out. But this is a bitching session, damn it!
It is.
So, okay.
What?
I've got a good one.
Good.
I've actually got two, but I'm gonna pull out the one that I haven't told you guys about before the show, because we did not briefly have a brainstorming session yesterday while we were on the train.
We didn't actually.
No, yeah. Anyway, sorry. What I'm going to bring up is interfaces, and when interfaces get in the way of a good adventure game, I
did that.
Yeah, but yours, I'm kind of still on the they were learning as they went thing. But if you take a look at, for instance, Core Design's Universe, or something that you might actually have played, what's it called? The Orion Conspiracy.
I know of it, but I have played neither, I'm afraid.
Lucky you. Both of these games are relatively late in the adventure game heyday. Orion Conspiracy and Universe. Well, Universe was a bit earlier than that. I think it was 94. It has what is ostensibly a context-sensitive interface. What that means is that it has 70 zillion fucking icons. You thought Gabriel Knight was bad. This is just beyond stupid. And it literally takes 4 or 5 clicks to get to the context verb or icon that you want to use.
Was that the tagline of the game? You thought Gabriel Knight was stupid. This is fucking ridiculous.
I can't actually remember if Universe came out before or after Gabriel Knight. Anyway, it's not. You guys are going to have to look it up. But it's like you click on an object in the world. The context-sensitive menu, appears at the bottom of the screen, and there are a couple of icons there. So you click the hand icon. Up comes another bunch of context-sensitive icons. Do you want to push it? Do you want to fondle it? Do you want to fuck it? Do you want to touch it? Do you want to anything? And then some of them have even a third level of context-sensitive icons. Do you want to fuck it? Okay. Do you want to use lube? Do you want
to fuck it hard? Do you want to fuck it gently?
Exactly. It is just beyond stupid. Now, the Orion Conspiracy uses the same idea. Every time you click on something, you get a context-sensitive menu, except it doesn't have that Inception thing. We need the Inception sound here, by the way. It doesn't go Inception on you. What it does, however, is completely ruin the challenge for you, because when you click on an object that you're supposed to use an inventory item on, the inventory button will appear, and objects that you don't need to use an inventory item on will not have that icon. So it basically telegraphs to you, this puzzle is solved with an inventory item. This puzzle is not. So those are 2 examples of where the interface butt fucks you.
That just sounds
like the sound
of
things as well. That involves a lot of mouse moving to the object on the screen, then down into the corner for the verb, and then is that? Did I listen to that correctly?
Oh yes, you did.
That just sounds like they were going for let's throw everything in here and the kitchen sink, and let's have a hint system as well, which is part of the interface. Oh, we're so clever.
Oh, yeah.
I do wonder why Sierra didn't bother to include the 77 other icons. We're trailblazers.
Oh, and the Orion Conspiracy, when you hover over some of the icons, it has the common decency to have like a tooltip that comes up. It says, well, this is the icon for push. This is the icon for talk. Universe has none of that. And it's in VGA resolution, and the icons are fugly as hell. So the icon for fuck and fondle look quite similar. And
the action, one thing leads to another, so I kind of see where they were coming from.
Oh, and really what gets me going about Universe is not only it's a poorly designed game at that, but the options menu, saving, loading, sound settings and all that, is also completely textless. It's all done in icons, the same fugly icons. So Universe is just an all-round horrible game. It looks pretty, but don't be deceived. It is so awful that one of the programmers hit a scathing remark to his boss in the source code that you can look at.
I've looked at that.
That is fucking hilarious. So anyway, it's a British game, so Gareth, you should at least be mildly interested.
Oh, we had a gaming industry, did we?
Oh, yes, you did. You had a fantastic gaming industry, as far as I can tell. I mean, Carmageddon is British.
As we did Revolution Software.
Oh, yes. Beneath the Steel Sky.
We did Grand Theft Auto and Dungeon Keeper, and then I think we went to sleep for 20 years. I think that's how it.
Yeah, well,
you just let Peter Molyneux out of his cage. You should never have done that.
Yeah, then Rockstar went on to do the Batman games, though, so I can kind of forgive you if Rockstar is still based in Britain. I don't know if they are. Actually, you do have John Romero living in the vicinity of the UK, because he's moved to Ireland recently and is working on games over there. So I realize he's not in the UK, but he's pretty damn close to it.
I probably live about as close to Denmark as I do to Ireland. That's an exaggeration.
Well, everything is relative.
Everything is relative. Well, as we speed towards 40 minutes, one of the things that I wanted to bring up, and actually I think you two have brought up much better examples of technology getting in the way than I have.
Too kind.
Well, as the conversation's gone on, I've wondered whether the thing that I'm going to bring up is more of a bug than it is a deliberate or unintentional use of the wrong sort of technology. Because for me, one of the things that really got me about a lot of the games that were released in the very early 90s was the timer bug. I remember playing a tennis game that became virtually impossible to play once you played the better players, because everything was based on the timing of the processor. So the really good players, before you'd even played the shot, were going to smash it straight back at you, and you had absolutely no chance. And the real obvious one, and there's a Space Quest historian video example in Space Quest 4. I mean, there are a number of timer bugs, but the very obvious one is the one in the Skaterama. Now, Space Quest 4 was released on March the 4th, 1991, and I'm pretty sure on March the 5th, 1991, everybody's PC was too quick to play this game.
Yes, and what's really I'm going to let that one get in on the both the human error and the what the hell were you guys thinking era, because era, I don't know what error, as in ERROR.
Well, it did shoot off the what the hell were you guys thinking era.
But what's really fucked up about Space Quest 4 is that if you played the disc version, none of these bugs are in there. It's only in the CD-ROM version that some genius sat down and recoded the entire timer thing to run off the CPU clock. I mean, what the? I have asked Dan Carver, the producer of that of the game. I mean, he was the producer of the CD-ROM version, so he must have had some idea what was going on. I've asked him what the hell went wrong, and he just shrugged and went, "It wasn't me."
No one knows who it was. I mean, Bill Shockley denies it as far as I do. Scott Murphy doesn't know, although given Scott Murphy's attitude towards people like that, the guy may just have gone into hiding in Buenos Aires or something.
Washington, as far as I know.
Oh. Well, that's getting closer. Just nuke Washington off the map to get the guy.
One of the key things that seems to be coming out of this, actually, is that adventure games went through a seismic shift, and perhaps not necessarily a very good one, with the invention of the CD-ROM. And I mean, my COD kind of hypothesis here would be that CDs gave designers far more data to play with than they'd ever had an opportunity to play with before. And so they went, we can put voices on here, and we can put video on here, and we can release our game without copy protection, because nobody's ever going to work out how to copy a CD. And maybe a lot of these problems came with not necessarily the invention of VGA or the invention of 3D hardware, but actually was the CD the really kind of seismic shifting technology that came into adventure games.
I'll buy that for $1.
Yes, I completely agree, and what I'm also hearing you say is that let's not attack the CD itself or the medium itself for giving. It's basically like handing a 10-year-old the keys to the liquor cabinet. It's just, oh my fucking god, I never knew what this could do. I mean, Kit's had a sip of juice the other day, and now he's just chucking up a bottle of Jack Daniels. Some people use the CD-ROM medium very, very well. Obviously, the same thing with the verbs in Monkey Island. You can't expect them to get it right, off the bat. Like the first couple is. I mean, the Seventh Guest got very, very close to being one of the first games to get it somewhat right on the CD-ROM, because let's face it, no one had seen pre-rendered 3D graphics like that. No one had seen full motion video streaming directly off the CD like that. They had pretty much everything going for it. Although there's a slightly weird thing about how most of the game is on disc 1, and then the last 2 rooms of the mansion are on disc 2. I've never figured that one out.
Can I get one last point in before Gareth plays us off, though? Because we're kind of looking back now, but if we apply the designer's aspect to this show, then I've just been reminded of something that riles me up, and I know it riles you up as well, Trolls, which is inexcusable. Lots of what we've covered, as you guys have said now, is technically excusable to a certain extent. But one thing that really riles me up today with modern adventure games is save games Why do you put a limit on
my
save
God.
slots? This is 2016. People are buying solid state drives by the terabyte. It's not as if we have to be rigidly conservative with disk space anymore. I mean, back in ye olden days, I would have to uninstall a game to make room for another. Now I have way too many games installed. I'm probably going to die before I play all of them. So really, people, you have the technology. Use it, for the love of God.
Oh, I could not agree more. I am clapping. I'm applauding. I'm ovating over this. This is one of my
You're
pet peeves as
ovulating.
well.
I thought he was about to say ovulating as well.
I'm ejaculating over this. No, ovulating is funnier. But yeah, seriously, Double Fine, what the fuck happened with Grim Fandango? That game is massive, and you give me 8 save slots? Go fuck yourselves. Seriously. We have like you said, we have been looking back on when technology went in the way, but we haven't actually covered much of when it does get in the way in current design times. We could have mentioned that AGS only really runs on Windows unless you got someone very, very good at wineskin. I think YJI has figured that out by now. And certainly the save slot thing is massive. This shit has got to stop.
Well, we might relegate some of this to the After Dark episode if you guys are interested in doing one of those.
I think we could be interested in doing one of those, and you'll be able to find that on the website afterwards. I want it to end, though, because I feel like after the shit that's been thrown at us this month, particularly to one of our brethren this month, that we should try and end on some kind of a positive. And my positive thought here is that in the 80s and the 90s, the sort of the heyday of the adventure game, the technology kept expanding and adventure games pushed at the very bleeding edge of that technology moving forward. But we've got to a point now where the technology has gone far beyond what is necessary to make an adventure game. So we're now at a point where you can pretty much make the adventure game you want to make. The tools are out there and available pretty much for free. It's down to your creativity and your technical choices and how you go about things. So I wanted to know whether you had any kind of thoughts on games that have been released in recent years that you think have deliberately made technical choices that have gone well.
Oh, that's
you
go
go first. If you got one, I'm just having a good old think here.
I've spent so much time being negative. I suppose I would probably select The Last Door as a game that very deliberately, and Fran Bow does kind of the same, because Fran Bow runs in something approximating SVGA resolution. Not quite SVGA, it's somewhat higher, but the resolution is lower than what you're used to these days. But The Last Door is very low res, and it playfully applies this retro look to it, which is kind of unlike anything that ever came before, in that you've got a resolution that's close to what AGI had, but you've got a color palette that is massive. But they do so much with the audio on the same, in that same space, which is something that AGI and lots of engines around the 80s and 90s could never do. So I think that's kind of an example of a great technological decision, because it works so well. It's to a great advantage to the game. I mean, if you haven't planned playing it, then by all means watch it. Go find some Let's Plays. I swear there were moments during the last episode. They've just wrapped up the second season and the series for good. There were moments where the goosebumps would not dissipate. I was scared shitless, and I have no qualms admitting that. I was scared shitless by a bunch of pixels and noises.
And I mean huge pixels, like Atari-sized pixels.
Very, very chunky. 4x4 pixels.
I'm gonna build off of that for what I'm gonna say, because I think Fred is absolutely right. We have now come to the point where you are able to recognize your technological limits, because frankly the sky seems to be the limit these days with regards to what you can do with 3D modeling and rendering and all this horse shit. And for the hobbyist, like you say, Gareth, all the tools are free. All you have to do is go out there and be creative and do it, and I wholeheartedly support that way of thinking. The only thing holding you back from making a game is your own ass stuck to the floor or something. I would say that people who have recognized not their limitations, but have recognized that you can still do good with what was previously maligned was actually Big Finish and Tesla Effect. Because you can say what you want about the 3D environments. Some say they look pretty dodgy and they're not up to scratch, but the video, you can't tell me the video doesn't look fucking fantastic.
That's very true.
And FMVs are, of course, notoriously maligned for having practically killed all semblance of gameplay and all this nonsense, nonsense. It was true for a great many games in the mid to late 90s. But one of those, Fred already brought them up. One of those people, sets of people who always knew what the hell they were doing, most of the time anyway, and at least got things right, were Access Software. And now Big Finish comprises, Chris Jones, who used to be the head guy over at Access. And I'm rambling a bit, but sorry. Can
I bring up one final one before I shut up and I let Gareth finish?
It's under 30 seconds.
Have another one, Trolls?
Fuck it, let the baby.
Thank you so
Go
much. On. You mentioned FMV being maligned, and that brought up Her Story in my mind, which is another absolutely brilliant game, and unlike anything I've ever seen before. And you could probably discuss whether it's an adventure game, but I find that story takes a front seat in it, so it really is.
Well, I'm not going to say anything. We'll save that for the After Dark. Yeah, me too.
We can get into that in the After Dark. So, that I think brings to the end another episode of Backseat Designers. This spiel is usually longer because people can remember what to say, but obviously the thing that we're going to move you towards is our Patreon account. If you like what you hear, if you want to support us, if you want us to do more of the BSD Plays episodes and the various other things that we do in our media empire, then please get along to our Patreon account. And on that note, we have to say thank you once again to Michael Council for supporting the show. We very much enjoy your pictures of you enjoying Backseat Designers and the other things that we do. So we raise a glass to you.
Thank you so much, Michael.
Thank you so much.
Everything to do with our plots to take over the world is documented on backseatdesigners.com. There you'll find all of the links to our RSS feed so that you can subscribe to our various shows. You'll find our Twitter links, you'll find our Facebook links, all of that social media goodness ripe and ready for the picking at backseatdesigners.com. And if you want to be on the show, because apparently some people do, you can email fred@backseatdesigners.com with any voice files, if you've got any text files, if you just want to send a message to the show. We are not picky, we are not fussy. We will literally read anything out. And that's a dangerous thing to promise. But I'm hoping to really sort of be provocative and get people to email in. So Fred,
I'm completely on board with
this. Yep, so Fred's ISP is going to be the one that gets blamed if anything.
I'm using a censorship-free DNS, so I think we're good.
Okay, well, that's brilliant then. In which case, thank you very much for listening to this episode of Backseat Designers. Please go to backseatdesigners.com, and it's goodbye from me, and it's goodbye from Fred.
Goodbye.
And goodbye from Trolls.
Goodbye, ladies.
And we will see you again next week, bright and breezy.
No more for today.